welcome. You're listening live to Heart at KMET 1490 AM, ABC Radio, ABC News Live Radio. Okay, it's early in the morning. I'm Dr. Mitra Rashidian. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sexologist in private practice in beautiful Encino, California. And I have to say that, this program aims to help you to understand and to become your loving self. See, I got it all together.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
I haven't had my morning coffee yet.
Okay, take a few sips and I'll say a couple of things. I'm Dr. Robert Jaffe, also a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified hypnotherapist as well. I'm here with my beautiful partner and friend, Dr. Mitra Rashidian, and we're here to share with you some of what we've learned over many years of study and practice, the goal of which is to feel more loving and more joyful every day of our lives. We are born into this world, we believe, as our loving, authentic, true selves, and we come in open, curious, honest, sexual, and trusting. And we have the capacity to be calm, emotionally available, and connected with others, as well as confident and compassionate. And this show on Friday morning is our relationship and addiction recovery show, where we will talk about all things about relationships and addiction and codependency, and that's what we're going to do today.
That's what we're going to do today. So please join us. Our phone number here live is 951-922-3532, and also you can visit us at YouTube, part2-heart.online/YouTube. So Dr. Robert, I want to say, every time that, you repeat those words that we are born into the world as our loving, authentic, true self, which is open, calm, that to me serves like my morning therapy for myself. To remind me of, this is the person that we are. This is who we are actually, and not all the thoughts and all the negativity that we face. I mean, every morning we are wake up with breaking news and some bad news, some sad news, something negative that happens in some corner of the world nearby or in a distance. And to just be reminded, this is who we are. This is the human that we are. We are not all that news. We are not all that negativity. We are not all that, I don't know. I mean, things that they don't make us feel good. Early, from 4 o'clock in the morning, we get ding, 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 all these things coming through our cell phones. And I'm dreadful to even turn on the news in the morning anymore.
Oh, well, I don't.
Yeah, so, and then,
Yeah.
it's just such a blessing to be able to hear these kind words. This is what life is all about,
Well, actually, if you look at the world and you see that all the stories are about people,
right?
and people go through ups and downs, and positive things and negative things, and loss, and happiness and joy, and at any given moment, anybody in the world is going through something.
Right.
And so what the news focuses on, for the most part, are the losses and the scary parts. And then that begs the question of, why is that? Why does the news do that? Because certainly for every negative thing, you can find a positive thing. And so we don't turn on the news and hear all these positive stories. We do hear them occasionally, but they're sort of interspersed with the quote-unquote important stuff, which is mostly negative. And the reason for that, I believe, is because fear sells. But why does fear sell? That's the question. And you and I have been talking a lot about the ego and spirit. And the ego is the part of us that is very, very concerned with physical survival. And it is the part that runs most people. So we used to, as I was saying yesterday in our discussion, we came from a place in the world where where day-to-day existence was not assured. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if the weather was going to destroy us, or if another tribe was going to come in and try to kill us. And we didn't know if we were going to have enough to eat. And so we had to develop a very strong survival instinct. We were born with that survival instinct, and that became very developed at an early stage in man's development. And so mostly we think about survival still as not assured, even though for the majority of people, at least in the Western world, survival is not a day-to-day fear. But the ego, having a job to do, then expands that physical fear of death into emotional, as though if somebody disagrees with us or somebody criticizes us, they're trying to destroy us, and the fear of that gets equated in our subconscious, not in our conscious, gets equated to whether we're going to be able to survive or not, and it triggers all of that adrenaline and norepinephrine and cortisol, and people get a charge out of that, and because we're so used to that, that's what people sort of look for in order to feel more alive, and as a result, we're less connected with our spiritual self, and that part of us, which is the spirit, the heart, the soul. That's not really concerned so much with the survival. It's concerned more with love and connection and gratitude and appreciation. And those qualities are not about survival, but those qualities are not usually the qualities, the qualities that are emphasized in our world. So we don't walk around thinking to ourselves, "Oh, I'm so happy, I'm so blessed, I love you, I love myself, I love the fact that we have a world that provides us with food and with air and with plants and trees and everything." We don't think about that. We take that for granted, and those are things that can bring us great joy and help us connect with our loving, authentic true self, but we focus more on things that we worry about and that can be dangerous to our survival. And I think that's why the news is just a reflection of it. It's not a cause of.
Right.
It's a reflection of where people are, and so we're here on this little tiny radio program, trying to help people understand that you can focus on other things than survival type things, and make your life bigger rather than shrinking down to the petty things that we worry about.
Exactly, and I think that's really important to kind of open up a little bit more, because when we focus on fear and survival only and nothing else, that's not a good feeling to experience every day constantly, and then that can actually, I think, to me, in my opinion, is one of the reasons for such a high rise of addictions.
Mm-hmm.
Because people want to stay away from fear.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they don't have the practice of knowing themselves as human that they are, calm, beautiful, connected, curious, all those qualities that we can use in order to survive in a happy way, actually.
Right.
And then, that I think, is directly connected to addictive behaviors.
Yeah, so what we do then is we vacillate inside of ourselves between what we think is life and death. So if somebody is criticizing us, we take that as an attack on our life, try to avoid it, or we try to come back and overpower them with our feelings and our thoughts. And that's when you were talking about addiction, I was thinking about there are two kinds of addictions. There are chemical addictions, which are drugs and alcohol, smoking, and then there's process addictions. And those are like, we can have a sex addiction, we can have a gambling addiction. There are things that we do where we can become addicted to feelings inside of us. And I think of gambling as a perfect example, because if you're rolling the dice and a 7 is a win and a snake eyes is a loss, then you're vacillating between winning and losing, or at a subconscious level between life and death. Winning equals life, losing equals death, but either way, our biological system is creating the same chemicals. So people who are addicted, let's say, to gambling, although if you ask them consciously, would you rather win or lose, of course they're going to say win. But at a biological level, it really doesn't matter when you're addicted, because the rolling of the dice gets the cortisol and the norepinephrine and the other chemicals going, and you have the same response internally. So you roll and it hits a 7, it's I win, and then you roll and it's a snake eyes and it's I lose.
It's the same,
and it's the same. It's the same biological reaction inside, and so so that's really what the addiction is. It's to the biological reaction, and so what we want to do is we want to help people recognize that you don't have to be in a win-lose, life or death mode in order to feel good. And the way that you can feel good is by switching the mode that you're operating on from from ego into spirit, right? So then when you're feeling loving, there's no up and down. It's no like I win or I lose. You feel joyful because that feeling of loving that you're giving out feels very warm and comforting, and gives you a heightened sense of a purpose. That yeah. And so that's all I want to say about that for now.
For now, because we are getting close to our commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be listening to more of this fascinating discussion about addictions and relationships and codependency, and how we need to focus on our loving, authentic, true self.
Absolutely.
So see you shortly in a few minutes. Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Heart to Heart program at KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert are here. Our topic this morning is addictions, codependency, and relationships. And please join us. We encourage you to please call us and ask our questions, or introduce the program to those that you think they can benefit from. Our phone number here live, 951-922-3532. You can also watch us on YouTube, heart-to-heart.online/YouTube, and we have some free downloads for you over there, which we hope that you can benefit from. So, Dr. Robert, we were talking about addictions. Addictions.
So we were talking about the ego and the spirit, and so I don't want to give the impression that I'm demonizing the ego. The ego is an important part of being the human being. The human I think of as the ego, which is the part that recognizes that we have a body, and the part that is located in time and this particular space that we're in, and that's the part that travels through life and has different experiences, and we have different emotions attached to that, and all of that is as it should be, because that's the way we're created. The fact that the ego is very concerned about physical survival is okay, because we are physical creatures on this level of existence, and we need to make sure that we are safe. So I'm not trying to demonize it. But what I'm saying is, when that is all that we pay attention to, That's the human part of us. The other side of us is the being part of us, and the being part of us is the spirit, the soul, the heart, the part that's capable of selfless acts, the part that's capable of giving unselfishly to others, the part that's capable of seeing others as no better or lesser than ourselves. That's the being part, and that being part, I think, is a lot of times overlooked and not embodied enough in the world, because I think that could be very helpful to people in terms of their own happiness and joy. So now we're here talking about addictions. The biggest addiction that we believe is what happens to people is the addiction of codependency.
Right.
And what codependency basically is an addiction to something outside of ourselves in order to make us feel better. So what does that involve? That involves mostly ego-based things, right? So now we're not saying that anything outside of you that makes you feel good is an addiction. What we're saying is that anything outside of you that you use over and over again to the exclusion of anything else is borders on the addiction, or it can become an addiction.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, what is codependency? Codependency is when we have a wounding inside. We talked at the very beginning about our authentic true selves, and that's the way we were born into the world. Now, what happens to us between birth and 1 year old, or birth and 5 years old, or birth and 10 years old? Those are all experiences that we go through that teach us that our authentic true selves are valid, are important, are worthwhile, and that's what we need to be aware of and focus on, or teach us the opposite, that our authentic true selves aren't welcomed, aren't valuable, aren't wanted, and we need then to adapt to the environment in order to feel like we are safe. So that's putting it, of course, in a black and white sense, and most people don't have an all or nothing experience. They have some wounding and some and some healing and some love, along with some of the negativity. But it begins usually in childhood, where the child's parents, because they didn't get it when they were young, feel basically inadequate. They don't feel good about themselves. They feel unfulfilled. And then those feelings get put on or projected onto their children. So what projection means is, I don't feel good, and that's my view of the world, is that the world is not a good place, is not a safe place, and so now you're my child, and I'm going to give you that philosophy.
Right.
Yeah.
So we see, based on your description, codependency is, I don't know if I can call it, it's a psychological state of mind, maybe.
Yes.
Right, that
Mm-hmm.
I was going to call it a disease, because to me, it could actually look like a disease. It's a lifelong disease that you don't know what to do with it. But if I just call it a psychological state of mind, it's something that begins to shape during childhood and early on, actually, as a matter of fact.
Correct.
Right, and then where people have no recollection of, how did this happen to me?
Mm-hmm.
How did I become a codependent? And many of us, actually, we don't recognize we are a codependent
Mm-hmm.
until we actually go to therapy and understand why some of the things that I do, why my life is not happy. I have all these things, I have all this success, I have all these accomplishments, and I'm not happy.
Yes. Yeah. And that's of course very what's the word? It's ubiquitous in our culture.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is in our culture, exactly. And if we see, you and I are able to detect it because this is our job,
Right.
Right? We see when people talk how they are talking from a codependent perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and they are so not aware of what's the underlying reasons for the way they talk, the way they believe, the way they are hurting themselves, and their way as to why they're not happy, and they are looking for more external factors to bring them happiness.
Correct.
And we see affairs happen because of that. We see many things happens out of that.
Yes. Yes. So again, usually starting in childhood, often in early childhood, because the parents don't feel happy or good about themselves, the child then feels like, okay, if my parent isn't happy, and the parent, of course, doesn't have to verbalize, I'm not a happy person, they act unhappy, right? And the child gets the message that the parent is not happy, or the parent feels sort of lost or feels inadequate, and so the child then feels insecure because the child needs a competent, adequate parent in order to feel safe in the world and to feel loved. So what happens then is the child either takes on that feeling of inadequacy and woundedness, and there's something wrong with them, or they defend against it. And oftentimes people who defend against those negative feelings end up feeling better than, or what we call grandiose. So people who are wounded and who are codependent can vacillate between feeling inadequate and grandiose, or they can just feel inadequate most of the time, or they can feel grandiose most of the time. And so what they do as children is they try to stabilize their parents. And so it becomes sort of a role reversal where what we call the child becomes parentified, which means that the child then takes on the role of being the parent to the parent. And that, of course, is sort of a way that the child has of saying, okay, I can see that you're struggling, so I'm going to take over and make sure that you're okay, because I need you to be okay, because so that I can survive, because the child can't go out into the world and make a living,
Right.
and the child doesn't know how to deal with all the uncomfortable feelings, so they put all their energy into trying to make their parent okay.
And we see that in in family sessions.
Yes.
When children along with their parents attend therapy, and how children talk as though they are so grown up, and it's amazing that how some of children have in-depth understanding of what they see, and what they see is not wrong, it's actually accurate.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's important to recognize that these are all subconscious or unconscious processes, and that means that people just automatically learn how to do this without recognizing what they're doing, and certainly not recognizing why they're doing it. So we grow up in this environment where we feel inadequate, and we feel like we have to caretake other people, and that becomes the central dilemma of the person as they mature and they grow older. So they may pick a partner where they can feel like they have a purpose and they're going to fix the partner, and that often happens in codependent relationships. And the cost of this is that the child doesn't really get to be the child. So the child then, because the child feels like they have to take care of the parent, the child learns that it's not okay to have my own needs, and maybe becomes so disconnected from their own needs that they don't know what they need, and it's not okay for them to feel like they need anything, because all of their energy has to be into taking care of the other person. And I've said this before on the radio, and I'm going to say it again. The standard joke that's funny but not so funny is when two adults go to sleep together and they wake up in the morning and one turns to the other and says, "Good morning, how am I?"
Yeah.
Because what that means is I've turned over a control of how I feel to how good you are, to how good you feel. And if you feel positive toward me, I can feel happy. And if you feel negative toward me, I can't feel happy.
Exactly. I mean, this is such an important process that parents, without knowing, they are actually, I don't know if the word helping is the right word to say, but they are, pushing their children to grow up as a codependent
Mm-hmm.
when they are not able to see their own codependent attitude and behavior and interaction with their children, which is really detrimental. And then the other things that I hear when it comes to codependency, I see that one way to deny it or not even wanting to look at it is, well, everybody's like that. Everybody does it this way. So my parents did that. We survived. Everybody else survived. This is part of our culture. This is how our family system works. So they justify it. They rationalize it
Right.
for themselves.
Right.
For generations, this is how we have lived together, or this is how, our family tradition is, and all of that. But essentially, these are all words of denial. I don't want to see the depth of the problem, and I don't want to see what I can do to change that.
Right. Right. So I want to say a little bit about unconscious and subconscious. The subconscious is like the mind is like an iceberg, and so in an iceberg, the part that is above the ocean, that where you can actually see it, is somewhere between 10 and 15% of the iceberg. The other 85 to 90% of the iceberg is below the water. What that means in terms of the human psyche is that the unconscious or the subconscious, those are both different levels of unawareness of what actually drives us. Those are things that are out of our awareness. And so we just do the behavior without being aware of why we're doing the behavior. And because we do that behavior and because we don't understand why we're doing it, we are acting in ways that are detrimental to our own personal growth. And so what happens when we're codependent is there's an underlying feeling of emptiness that people experience, and then they try and fill it up with other types of things and oftentimes other addictions. So smoking cigarettes is probably the most common, and people smoke cigarettes and they know that they enjoy smoking cigarettes, but they don't understand oftentimes. Yes, there's certainly a physical component of the addiction that the cigarette manufacturers put in chemicals that make us physiologically dependent, but the psychological component is much stronger even than that. And people don't understand that it gives them a lift, and the lift that they get from the nicotine is trying to lift them out of that place of emptiness that gets held in our subconscious. That vulnerable little child who then had to leave in order to take care of their parents is now the part of us that's running us.
Exactly.
Yes, and that child wants to come out and play, and we don't allow that child to come out and play because it's been too dangerous to be a child when we were raised by parents who didn't know how to nurture and take care of us. So we can't allow the child to come out and play, and yet that child part of us wants to and needs to come out and play, and that need that is frustrated comes up in the form of emptiness. There's something wrong inside of me, and I don't know what it is, but I just know I want to feel better.
Exactly. And then to feel better, and the need to feel better is, I think, the core part that people go do things externally to fill up that gap, right? So we see, for example, eating disorders.
Correct. Correct.
It's one of them. Then late night, eating. You're not hungry, but somehow people go and open the refrigerator door and they're just staring at, as though all the answers in the world are in that refrigerator.
Yeah,
right?
because the food often represents the love, which is the authentic true self that wasn't allowed to come out before, and so we equate the food with love. We equate the good feeling that we get when we take a puff of the cigarette, when we take a puff of the marijuana, when we take the drink. We equate that with love, but actually nothing can substitute for love except for love.
Right. What's interesting that when that happens and people go to the refrigerator, they're usually looking for something like ice cream. They're looking for something like cheese and honey, or something that it's not actually like protein things or anything like that, but it's something that gives that immediate gratification.
Exactly.
Immediate calmness.
Exactly.
And before you know it, the spoon of ice cream becomes a gallon of ice cream.
Yeah. And I want to reemphasize, we're not bad for the fact that we're struggling with addictions. We'll talk more about this right after our break.
Yes, please join. Welcome back from our commercial break. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert at Heart to Heart, KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio. Our telephone number live here is 951-922-3532. Please join us, ask questions. This program is for you, and without you, this show is not going to happen. But we want to be able to offer you what you like to hear, and I'm sure that is a lot that you would like to hear. So looking forward to hearing from you. So Dr. Robert, we were talking about food as a codependency issue.
Right, and food is a big one.
Right.
Because often people were given food as a child, and that became a central pleasure for them.
Exactly.
And started to be subconsciously, usually subconsciously, but maybe consciously as well, it equated with love.
Right.
There's actually a wonderful book on that by Janine Roth called "When Food Is Love."
When food is
Yeah.
love. Yeah.
And then people get confused about it, and oftentimes don't understand why they're wanting to indulge in food, and why they have a battle with food.
Yeah, actually, it just reminded me of, I have this client who he told me that, he's struggling with weight and other factors in his life, and I have to say he has made tremendous, progress, but still there are so many things that he needs to take care of. So one thing, he told me the other day that after a meeting he felt really hungry,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was lunchtime and he wanted to eat, but because he's watching his weight and watching what he's eating and all of that, he decided to stop by at the nearby McDonald's and just get a chicken sandwich,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he was just reminding himself, okay, you're gonna go there and you're just gonna get a chicken sandwich and nothing else, right?
Right, but in the back of his mind.
Well, in the back of his mind, he was picturing, Big Mac, because that was his favorite.
Uh-huh.
But then again, he was telling himself, he was reminding himself that he's not gonna do that, right? Only to get to McDonald's at the cashier by the window, and before he knows it, he's ordering 2 Big Macs and 2 large meals of Big Mac, right? Like French fries, drink, and the whole Big Mac,
Right.
And then right before he even can notice it, both of them were gone. Yeah, so and then he felt so bad about what the hell happened here. I promised myself to just get a chicken sandwich,
Right.
and I ended up with 2 sets of Big Mac meal.
Yes.
And he was going nuts. He was going crazy. He said, Mitra, what happened here? Why did I do that? Well, what happened? How come this happened?
Mm-hmm.
And then, we had to process that. But I thought, this is a good example here when we're talking about food, addictions, and how codependent attitude can tell us food is what you need, especially after a day of struggling and going through tough meetings and all of that. You want to pamper yourself, but instead of staying with your goal that what's good for you to eat, you just go and you do self-sabotaging behavior.
Correct. And I think that's such an important point, because what you're talking about is the power of the subconscious versus the power of the conscious. And so the book that you and I are writing, that the working title of which is The Subconscious Runs the Show, is something that most people don't understand. Most people don't even recognize that they have a subconscious, or that if they do, they don't really know what it does.
Some people even get surprised. What are you talking about?
Exactly. Yeah. And so the subconscious, again, like the bottom part of the iceberg, is a major part of our mind, and that's the part of our mind that controls our feeling states, right? So we don't usually wake up in the morning and go, okay, today I'm going to feel happy, and then the rest of the day we feel happy, right? It just sort of happens, but it happens below the level of conscious awareness. And there's a lot of reasons why we have our feelings that belong to the subconscious that we don't know about. So your example is that he has equated food with love, and that so his subconscious, which is much bigger and much more powerful than his conscious, just overrides his conscious desire. And so I want to say to our general public, it's very important that you recognize that addiction is multi-layered and has a lot of subconscious roots to it. And it's not a matter of willpower. And I can't say that strongly enough. It's not a matter of willpower. It's a matter of deconstructing how we were wounded and learning to heal from that wounding. And what does it mean to heal from the wounding? Well, going back to what I said earlier about having parents who weren't able to adequately parent us because of their own injury and their own feelings of inadequacy, we then needed to take over parenting them and trying to parent ourselves when we really weren't able to do that very well. It left us feeling very insecure. And so that feeling of insecurity and that feeling of I'm not enough and that feeling of emptiness keeps coming up and affects our self-esteem and affects our ability to give ourselves emotional nurturing that we needed. Then we try and fill it up with other things. And one of the other things that we fill it up with is success in the physical world. So we have a lot of people who are very, very successful with money.
As he is, actually, as this person is that I told you about.
As he is, he's very successful with money.
Successful with
yeah,
money.
yeah.
Yes.
And yet they don't feel good about themselves, and they don't have successful relationships, and they're always looking for more to fill themselves up, and the more can be another McDonald's hamburger, or the more can be another $1 million in the bank, or the more can be more sex, the more can be anything. But the more, although it gives us a temporary feeling of high, always drops us back down into what we're missing.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot in therapy, and it's actually a core part of therapy for us to understand. And one of the things that I tell to my client, they say, well, how are we going to get rid of this? I said, well, I'm sorry, this is not about a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
This is about a process,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then through that process is that we are going to gain the depth of awareness that we need.
Yeah, that's gaining the depth of awareness. The other piece is we didn't get what we needed when we were young. And we have a lot of feelings about that. Now, one of the feelings that we have and that people get stuck on is anger, okay? And people say, well, I don't want to blame my parents. They did the best they could. If I've heard that one person say that over the 36 years I've been doing this, I've heard 10,000 or more people say, I don't want to blame my parents. They did the best they could. And what I want to talk about, what I want to say right now about psychotherapy is that we are not here as therapists to dump on your parents. We are here to help you to recognize what you got and what you didn't get, and to process the feelings surrounding that. And one of the feelings is anger, and that is a legitimate feeling. That doesn't mean that if you feel angry and you feel it toward your parents, that's going to last forever. What we talk about a lot in recovery of our authentic true selves, which means moving out of codependency, moving out of addiction, is the grieving process. The grieving process means that we didn't get what we needed, and or we got a lot of what we didn't need. Maybe we got a lot of negativity, maybe we got hit, maybe we got sexually abused, maybe we got put down, maybe we got, all of these negative things that happened to us, and there was a big loss, a loss of feeling of safety, a loss of self-esteem, a loss of trust. Those feelings need to be grieved, and it takes a lot of courage to let yourself go into those feelings. But the goal is, with any grieving process, the goal is to get to the end of the grieving when you get to a place of understanding and acceptance.
Right.
And so when somebody dies, then you have to go through a grieving process to get to a place of acceptance. And if you don't go through that grieving process, those feelings never get resolved.
Right. And usually, the first thing that we do in about, the word, oh no, like we talked about it before, is something that sets us back and doesn't allow us to go through that grieving process. Right? It's sense of that, I don't want to hear about this, I don't want to, even think about this. So we just push it in the back. But then again, the reality is that it is there.
Yeah. Most people will never step foot in a therapist's office.
Right.
And that is because they intuitively know that there's a lot of feelings there, and those feelings are going to be hard to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen that myself. That people come in and they're motivated, but as soon as they get to the point of, now this is real, that I need to step inside my painful, memories, my painful feelings and all of that, they just say, you know what, I don't want to do this. It's too big to do it.
Yes, and people, like I said, most people never step foot in, and then people who do come in often expect it to be over in one session or 1 month or 3 months. They have an unrealistic expectation of what it takes. And so I'm going to say that therapy, although if you find the right therapist, it can be very, very beneficial and very healing, it is not an easy process, and it takes a lot of courage for people to do it.
I would say, it's one of the best investment a person can make on themselves.
It's a great investment, but for those people who have so much pain underneath, it seems like I don't want to open up the proverbial can of worms.
Exactly.
And people will actually say that.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, what's the point of opening a can of worm? But I already know what happened, and I don't want to experience the same pain again and again and again. And on the surface, that seems to be a logical, statement. Why would somebody want to deliberately re-experience the pain of life that they have gone through?
Right.
But the answer to that is that unless that's done, and then they can revisit this situation now as an adult, not as as how they see their role in it. Okay, that's how they can walk away from it and understand it and put it behind them.
Yeah, and when you say their role, what I'm going to say then is, as a child, we make decisions about how to handle things that may be very, very tough for anybody to handle, and we make the best decision we can at that particular age, given our particular personality. And so that's our role, is the fact that we made a decision how to handle it. That doesn't mean that we were wrong or bad, that we made that decision, But we can revisit it as an adult and look at the fact that we made a decision how to handle it and choose to begin to process the feeling now as an adult rather than we did as the vulnerable child.
And the example that you gave at the beginning of the program today was that how some children become the parent as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Right? So in the name of, I don't want my mom to get hurt, I don't want my dad to get hurt. And some children are able to recognize the pain, are able to see, and what they see is real, is not made up. So they decide to take a direction that they can take care of things. This is a fascinating discussion, and I think we're going to have to continue this because this is just the beginning. And I'd like to invite you to please join us next Thursday. I'm sorry, for our program
Next
on
Friday.
sexuality on Thursday. Yes, and then next Friday here
Oh.
again for the same program in addiction. And until then, we wish you well and be safe, and don't forget that all you need is love.
All you need is love, and it starts with self-love.
Okay, see you next week.
Bye-bye.